ethnic.
Thank you. So I will talk about mixed cultural identity of authors and their characters who immigrated from the post-Soviet countries to Germany, Israel, and the United States, and who switched in their work into the language of the new country. Yeah, there is a lot of confusion in the use of terms cultural identity, ethnic identity, and national identity. And this is important because, for example, when Putin started the war against Ukraine in 2014, his main claim was that Russians and Ukrainians are one people, один народ. But of course, it's nonsense. But what was meant by it? It was, of course, not that they are one ethnicity, because okay, Ukrainian it's one ethnicity, and the Russians another ethnicity, and there is no discussion in it. And it wasn't in this like national unity. It was what he meant by it is just like cultural unity between Ukrainian and Russians. And this claim, I have to say, like somehow resonated with some people who live in Eastern Ukraine and in Crimea, because okay, I personally was in Crimea several times, and I even lived some time in a family of Russian-speaking residents of Crimea, and I know that, yeah, a lot of them believed in this cultural unity. So that is why for me it was important to understand this notion of personal cultural and therefore political identity of some people. And okay, if I would in sociology, I would base it on some numbers, but for me it was not about numbers and not about some data of like a massive of people. I just wanted to understand some personal experience of people, which is, I think, the best way was like expressed in the works in the text of immigrated authors. So for my study, I chose writers with most complex combination of identities. First of all, they had different nationalities. All of them moved from Russian language to the language of their new country. And moreover, their ethnicity didn't coincide with their nationality, because most of them, or all of them, are of Jewish origin. So it is like most complicated thing. And what I was interested in is what would appear in common in their works, especially in the descriptions of their characters. Unfortunately, between those authors was no one from Lithuania. Maybe can you please tell me maybe names of writers who were born in Lithuania and then immigrated and continued to work in immigration and to write in the language maybe of a new country or
Jewish authors?
No. Lithuanian authors.
The migration to the United States was huge.
For example, Antanas Shilika is Antanas Shilika is his name. So he's sort of mid-generation. He's now approaching his 70s in Brazil. So a very successful author in Canada. He immigrated as a child. Of course, he was born there.
Maybe it wasn't.
But Jonas Mekas, as well.
You mean to switch to English or other languages?
Yes. Yes.
And the people who immigrated from Soviet Lithuania or just before?
Doesn't matter, just for me to know some names.
Okay.
Well, we had a case of a writer whose name is Saulius Tomas Kondratas, who immigrated in 1980s, already from Soviet Lithuania to the United States. And he declared that he's going to start a new phase of his work in English.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody expected his new words, his new novels in English, but it never happened. He wrote actually some texts in English, but they were not successful, and he switched to photography and later to PR, to the media, just literature also. That's one of those possible examples. Matters also partially because some of his work, but the lesser part of his work was written actually in English. He's more a bilingual writer, I think you could say. He continued writing in Lithuanian all the time, poetry, but he also has written, for example, his diary was written both Lithuanian and in English, which is a strange case of a diary. And often writes in two languages.
What is your purpose?
What is his name?
I'm a harvester. A New Yorker. She emigrated from Lithuania. She's Jewish. Emigrated from here. Born and brought. Well, she spoke Russian at home. She spoke Lithuanian in school. And then she emigrated as a young. Oh, she went to Moscow, I think, to study St. Petersburg. St. Petersburg Uni. She studied there, and she emigrated from there to New York and became a psychologist. Or she was already a psychologist, and then only started writing when she came back to Lithuania many years later to visit, and suddenly poetry ran out of her. And I was a witness. She joined a literary writing class and literally started writing in English. It was pretty amazing to watch her and like find her voice and anything. So yeah, and I have this one.
Great. I have to look for these names, yeah, because until now I knew only two names, Czesław Miłosz and Antanas Kama. But they didn't switch to another, they just continued to write in Lithuanian language, and it was in the beginning of 20th century.
Miłosz in Polish.
He was, okay.
Schema is, he wrote in Lithuanian.
But okay, and I was interested especially in those who are still alive and who immigrated or before, just before, or slightly after the collapse of the United States, of the USSR. And sorry. Because I just wanted to be in contact with them and to ask them if I don't understand anything, just rather than to make things up for myself. So I choose 8 authors. Oh, great. Alona Kimhi, Alex Epstein, and Boris Zalman, who immigrated to Israel. Gary Sheinberg, Lara Avniar, who became US citizens. Katja Petrowskaja, Olga Grjaznowa, and Alina Bronski, who moved to Germany. And today I just want to talk about German authors. First of all, because they describe cultural situation which is typical for Europe and closer to my interest and to your interest. So mostly about Katja Petrowskaja. Yeah, for me it was also, yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. For me, she the most impressive of them. Although she wrote only one book. Now, just several days ago, I saw on Facebook that her second book was published almost several days ago. Olga Grjaznowa wrote already, as I know, about at least three books, and Alina Bronski also 2 or 3 books. Okay, so what do I look when I just want to understand the cultural identity of a character or of a narrator? First of all, the words from another language which they use in their speech. Sometimes there is such a literary device that words from another language are included in the speech of character just to show that he or she, this character, is from another culture. For example, in Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, Fleur de la Cour inserts French words, but what are these words in this case? This is most common words from this language. For example, voilà, or I don't know, Fleur de la Cour says about Harry Potter as petit garçon. So just small words which everybody, regardless of their involvement of this culture, can understand. And the role of these words is just to show to the reader so that he or she immediately realize to which culture this character belong. But sometimes an author plays a more subtle game and character use words from their native language, not because these are the most common words, but because these words or terms reflect some phenomenon that is specific to narrator culture. I mean, not because this phenomenon is cannot be found elsewhere, but because of special significance of this term in the culture of the character. For example, an example from Jewish culture, there is a word Shabbat, for example, no, it can be translated as Saturday. Okay, it is Saturday, but there is some difference. For example, let's take the most recent autobiographical novel by Sarah Glass, which was written in English, Kissing Girls on Shabbat. It's about this novel regards some queer identity of the author within Jewish and religious community and how difficult it is. So such a title with the word Shabbat tells to the reader much more and slightly different meaning than, let's say, Kissing Girls on Saturday or Kissing Girls on Sunday, and maybe it is even more closer to Kissing Girls on Easter. So the word can be translated to another language, but the cultural context cannot be. Cultural context will be lost in translation. Okay, so Shabbat. And then could you say maybe such words in Lithuanian language?
Okay.
Not very common, but some specific, which reflects some idea that is in Lithuanian culture. But for example, I was told about the word bičiuliai. I was told that this word before it was originally it was a special degree of closeness between two beekeepers who exchanged a swarm of bees. I don't know if is it correct or not. Okay, but now it means just a close friends. And in Ukrainian language, there is such a notion as kum and kuma, which means like godfather or godmother in relation to the parents of the child. And now it means just a very close friendship. It's special friend without any romantic relation, but it's one special friend, like almost spiritual brother or sister. So this kind of words maybe in the Lithuanian culture also. This food.
I don't know about food and foreign. For me, was for example, pashtet. For me, is cheese. Maybe I'm special cheese, but people say to me, no, pashtet is not cheese. But for me, Austria is cheese. Yeah. So for example, it could be a thing.
Yeah, varshke, it is something from the culture, not from the Lithuanian culture, but from the culture of Eastern Europeans, because in Israel, nobody knows There is such kind of cheese, like white cheese. They found a special word for this white cheese, just to differentiate it from regular normal cheese. Yes, yes, but we can understand it. But no, not the same. No, not exactly the same.
We have cheese on wash.
Yeah,
We call it
White
wash cheese.
I don't know how what Sergii maybe, no? Because it has a meaning. Sergii, that is a grass snake. But it has a mythological meaning. It's a phallic meaning as well. But so maybe eventually that we would sort of understand. That would be something that we would understand, but very few other people would.
Well, I remember now the title of novel by Alvydas Šlepikas, Vilko vaikai, in Lithuanian, which is a special idiom. In German, you might understand Wolfskinder, the children of wolves. These mean those abandoned children from East Prussia who were then orphaned and wandered to Lithuania and were adopted by Lithuanian families. So this is a historical idiom, this those children. And the translation, the English translation of that novel, which was published in Britain and became quite acknowledged, I think. The title was changed to In the Shadow of Wolves, because the wolves in the wolves in the children would be unrecognizable for British readers. So I think.
And in the previous translation, I haven't read it yet, but I saw that it was published with My Name is Marita. Yes, so probably also, I don't know who the translator used name.
Yes, this is actually the original title, but they didn't use the children of wolves.
Yeah, so yes,
The shadow
maybe
of
it's
wolves,
also
yeah.
it's
Yeah.
translatable and not.
But I'm trying to come back to Olga's part because she used some Lithuanian words, but for the life of me, I won't be able to remember them. She does have her English poetry is backwards. There are some Russian words and there are some Lithuanian words as well. And I can't remember one. But I will check.
So yes, in every culture there are some specific words which cannot be translated, can be translated, but with the loss of some part of the meaning, like farshke. It's almost what it is, but not exactly. Okay, so now like more specifically about these authors, about Katja Petrowskaja and her book, maybe Esther. Who among you read this book? Maybe. Which language? Ukrainian, English, German? In what? In English.
I have heard her talk about the book. I have no book. In English, I have.
In English. Why I ask? Because specifically for this book, it is very important, and she herself says that it's very important which language somebody reads it, and she for a long time she rejected the idea of translating it into Russian language. Now I think this book already translated, but for a lot of years she rejected this idea. And why? She okay. She told about it that arguing about possible translation of this book into other languages, she assumes that in Russian translation it will be perceived as a mediocre memoirs, clumsy, filled with incomprehensible stumbling and delirium. So she switched it to German so that the novel would be perceived in a more global, in universal sense. And also about this, like military history, she says, it's interesting. If military history is written in Russian, then in some sense, the moral right was implicit in the language itself, identifying oneself with the victims or winners. If the same thing is told in German, a very strange alienation occurs. And then these stories are freed from psychological and biographical specifics, but are filled with something anthropological. It's interesting that this interview was done in 2013, and it's like interesting to see how within 2 years these roles of victim and aggressor and moral right and moral wrong has changed for 2 years in the discourse of Russia in the context of this aggression. Okay, and now some specific examples of things within her book, which depend on the cultural context and how they can be transferred to a reader from another culture. When talking about her childhood, Petrovskaya mentions fragments from Soviet culture, different fragments from Soviet culture. In the first chapter, she talks about her uncle Vil, who dreamed of becoming an aircraft designer and devote his life to aircrafts. And Petrovskaya recites the Soviet aviation hymn in her own German translation. Here is English translation, but for this book, I will read it in German with terrible Jewish accent. Auch mein Herz schlug schneller und höher, wenn ich diese Hymne hörte. 50 Jahre später, besonders die aufsteigende Melodie. Immer höher, höher und höher stören wir den Flug unserer Vögel. Und in jedem Propeller atmet die Ruhe unserer Grenze. So you can see there is no right, no rhythm, nothing. And for those who is like in field of Historia, maybe you maybe you know this aviation hymn, no? Just 10 seconds of it. So for anybody who from Russian culture or from Soviet culture, he or she can understand what it is about. But for German reader, this fragment loses some of the meaning and doesn't convey the sensation of the narrator mentioning the rising melody. So the question is, for me, it was a question why Petrovskaya wanted to convey to the reader this song by translating by her own translation, what she wanted to transfer, and maybe more important, what she wanted to avoid in conveying. Because it turns out that in 1920s in Germany, there was 2 similar songs with the same tune. One, it was popular among Nazi supporters, and other among German communists. First of them was a song named Herbei zum Kampf. This song is included in the movie of Leni Riefenstahl, Triumph of the Will. And the second, it was Rote Flieger, which was like the song of red German communists, red German Luftwaffe. It was recorded in 1930, which means at the same time, almost. And the lyric of this song is very close. It's almost the translation of the Soviet hymn. And you can see it. Just a minute. So higher and higher and higher, we rise despite hatred and scorn. And every propeller is wearing the song, we protect the Soviet Union. So she could, like Petrovskaya, could bring the German translation from this version, but she decided not to do it. And the question is why? I think because she just consciously takes herself as a child and as an author from this context, just to show the detachment from the German culture, because not she as an author, but she as a narrator, because a narrator is a person who was born and rising in the United States, and he or she wanted to to show this detachment from German culture. It was like one case, but another case where there is no such a purpose to demonstrate such detachment, she skillfully finds images from German culture to express her experience in the most understandable manner for the German reader. For example, when mentioning the inscription on the Auschwitz gates, she says, like the narrator says, of course I know that we must have gone through this gate. I know what is written on this gate, the way I know what 2 + 2 is, how brother Jacob goes, or the Lord Prayer. Of course, I'm sure that everybody knows what was written on the gate of Auschwitz and the Lord Prayer. But what about the brother Jacob? Somebody knows about it? Yeah, Charles Rock, yeah.
I mean, in Polish.
Even in Polish. I know about French version, about English version, and about German version, but I didn't know about Polish. But anyway, for like Soviet-born child, there is no way that somebody from the children of Soviet Union knew this lullaby. So it was completely unknown in Soviet Union. So there is no way that narrator could have memorized it as a child. So this title was like put here to replace something else for the German-speaking reader, which is in Russian-speaking culture is synonymous with to know by heart. So now I have a question: what is in Lithuanian culture in such an expression to know something as good as what?
Well, no, in Soviet, the one band, a strange band called Migrant that came, it was the most, the biggest export of from France to the Soviet Union. The band called Migrant, and they probably also sang the song. I have no idea. But all I know is that they came from France in 1970, whatever, and they toured the Soviet Union, including Lithuania.
Interesting.
So I don't know. This might be a reference, but I have no idea.
Maybe. I didn't know about it.
So our versions of popular song. And it goes for Edith Barrow.
And yeah, and it has been used as well in poetry by the kid or not. She used it, like mocks and makes fun of it.
The children's song, the children poem for Christmas and New Year parties around the Christmas tree.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not the same.
So
Yeah, so like we don't ever sing it anymore, like
It's interesting that in Russian there is expression to know something as well as Otche Nash. To know something as Otche Nash, which actually is a Lord's Prayer. So even in Soviet culture, it was just an expression.
Who actually knew it? Who actually knew it in Soviet?
Nobody knew it, yeah. But this expression to know something as well as Otche Nash still was in Soviet period also as well.
no, big daddy, big daddy.
What expression do we use in Lithuania to say you know something
As well as,
for sure.
yeah, for sure, yes.
So we would say to know something as well as 2 plus 2.
Ah,
Would be
great.
times 2.
Great. Great.
Добре, я не знаю. Ну, широко, добре.
Okay, so these were 2 examples. In one case, the author didn't like consciously didn't want to find an equivalent of one cultural situation in another culture, and in second example, she deliberately found it, and just to express her idea to a German reader. And now the third example, where there is no equivalent at all, and what author does if there is no equivalent. In one of the climax points of the novel, it occurs in last chapter, when narrator travels to the last point of her journey, the labor camp Mauthausen, and she summarizes her expedition in these words. My mind began to interlace 2 quotations I used to love back. Manuscripts don't burn, and the letter always arrives at its destination. These statements had made me hope that everything was just a matter of interpretation, and nothing gets lost. But now they struck me as arrogant, cloying foolishness, mushy piety. Manuscripts burn better than wood, and letters are constantly getting lost, if they are written at all, and if they are misunderstood. So the meaning of whole passage is clear. Although cultural works convince us that nothing disappears without a trace, but as soon as you try to look for something, you see that almost all traces are lost or lead to a wrong place. But let's look to these 2 quotations. The favorite quotes of narrator, the first written in German and the second in English, originally it was German. The first one, manuscripted brennen nicht. The second one, I'm sure all of you recognize. It's from the text by Jacques Lacan, Seminar on the Purloined Letter. But do you recognize the first one?
Yeah,
of course, Bulgakov. Okay. Yeah. But I think we who were born in post-Soviet culture, we understand. We have read it, but in German culture, in Germany, very little of people read Bulgakov. So in this case, there is no sense for the author or for the narrator. There is no sense to explain the whole context of this quotation, because even without explaining, without understanding what is the source of this quote, a reader can understand the idea of this passage. But there are some cases when context of the quotation is really important, and the author has to explain it. So how he or she did it. So let's consider the fragment from Alina Bronski's novel, Broken Glass Park. The central character of this novel is a young girl who immigrated from Russia to Germany, and wanting to integrate into German culture as quickly as possible, she has a romantic affair with a German young man. And at one point, this young man gives her a postcard, which he signs with a stanza of verse. A slightly altered, translated to German stanza of a poem by Osip Mandelstam. And then we will pack the big suitcases, so full they will almost burst, strap on our wings and lift off, heading for distant southern atolls. Distant southern atolls, it is not from the original, but it's just slightly different. So for a native of German culture, both as character and the reader, such a text is just a romantic invitation for a partner to go on a romantic journey. And in order to realize and to show how inappropriate such a text is in this situation, the author has to explain the entire context to the reader through the lips of the main character. Mandelstam's original poem was written in 1931, when he and his beloved were trying to flee the city to avoid arrest. So the actual feeling that this poem conveys are just fear, tragedy, almost despair. Or should we not gather some cord and tie up the basket before dawn, so as to leave for the station where no one will find us? So we can see that it's often just impossible to simply transfer an element from one culture to the language of another culture without bringing all this context which goes with it. So these were just, for examples, how different author can just resolve this problem of like bringing the pieces of his or her own culture to the culture of the reader from another culture. And I think, for me, I think it's interesting and important for all of us who works in the field of philology, just to think about these problems of these issues, when we analyze the works, or when we create some cultural events, or especially when we work in the field of translation. So I hope it was like it gives you some, I don't know, idea on your thoughts about it, and I would be glad if you just want to share it. Of course, I'm ready to answer your question about it, but also I will be interested in your ideas and maybe your experience related to such intercultural like communication, transferring. Yeah, we like now we move to discussion.
What the logical approach? Like, do you use some theory to draw this?
Theory.
Reader response.
Yeah, no, reader response criticism. It was, I think, what was the basic of my research.
Because you what I remember, so in literary theory, there is it's a broad field that I don't know very much about, but it's called sort of literary translingualism, and it is, and there is a strong schooling on writers who write now in Germany. So they might come from different countries, but they are translingual. So the names of reference will be, I think he's called James Gellman. This the old very famous book called maybe Lost in
No, lost in interpretation.
I would have.
Okay, there are a lot of.
Olga Grjaznowa, she is a specialist in German translingual writing, and I think you might find her work interesting. And she organized a conference where I met Katja Petrowskaja. She was an invited author there. It was a hit. So I think that there is stuff that's being done this linguistically, and I think that might be very interesting because it's fascinating what you're talking about, and especially you see the interrelation between the three kinds of national identities, because they are not like national, cultural, and ethnic. And so Jewish would be ethnic. Like, it's a kind of, no, it's interesting to me.
I think you really
define national, cultural, and ethnic. So in your focus, how do you define those three identities?
Yes, with Jews, it's the most complicated thing because like Ashkenazi Jews, it's the one culture, and Sephardi Jews, it's completely another culture, which means without one ethnic, there are different cultures or subcultures. Like Ashkenazi are like Western Jews and Sephardi Jews from Arab countries. But yes, like ethnically, which means rather like with Jews, it relates also to religion, and this complicates everything. So with like a national identity, it is the most simple way. It's okay, a political nation, which means everybody who lives in this country and has a like passport of this country, they belong to this nation. For me, no, of course, it's like political, like it's a notion of political nation, and with the culture, as I told, it is like more complicated because inside inside one nation there are different subcultures, and even subculture of people who live in cities and subculture in Ukraine. It is very actual. People who live in villages, it's different, like different cultures. So yes, by culture, I mean not national culture, but culture like a subculture within one nation.
Any Lithuanian, like any Lithuanian who emigrated from the Soviet Union, asked the guy on Mars, for example, whether he would have considered himself a Soviet national, he would feel like he considered himself, and we would have always considered him to be Lithuanian, irrespective of his passport. So you see, a national identity is also a very complicated identity. It's hard to define it.
You know, the main idea of my research, not of like what I told in this presentation, but the main idea of my research was to change the idea, to change the attitude to people and authors who immigrated from post-Soviet countries as Russians, because especially in the United States, all of them are like Russians. And Katja Petrowskaja is also one of Russians, although he is like Ukrainian from Ukrainian origin. And Olga Grjaznowa also is like Russian, although also are Russian, is Russian, although she is from Azerbaijan. So especially in the United States, this attitude towards everybody who is from post-Soviet territory as Russian is very strong, and I just wanted to change it. So all my book, which was published 2 years ago, was like with the claim of no, it's not Russian authors. It's everybody of them from different culture, from different ethnic, and from different nations. It's not Russians.
And I gave her as example for few chapters like that, just to show how complex it is. And I have a question because I like have you worked with this intertextual allusions, but were you able to find actually something related to Jewish culture in her text? Because like the intertextual example, because their family is very secular, and though her brother, he moved toward religious identity, and he became very believing Jew. She did not, and she was visited in our classes at my university, classes of her brother, and she always repeats that she knows nothing about Judaism, about even this Soviet Jewish culture. So perhaps you found something like this. And second, about Ukrainian intertext. I know that she was blamed because the only Ukrainian moment in her, like openly Ukrainian moment in her book is when she describes the neighbors near her house on Florence Street. And there is a crazy village, a peasant lady who suffered, whose family died in Holodomor. And they said, like, that she strengthened this link of Ukrainian and village, which is often used by propaganda. But perhaps if you look more deeply, you can find this Ukrainian motif and Jewish motif. Not only this Soviet motif from, because Soviet are very obvious, like she mentioned, like Soviet and Russian Bakhmut and so on, but perhaps Jewish and Ukrainian.
About Jewish motifs of her identity, her search started from she started to look for her grandfather who lived in Germany and who was a Jewish teacher for deaf orphan children. So
and intertext, like allusions to some, like does she know something which we defined as a Jewish culture? Because she obviously knows this Soviet anthems or Akhmatova, or like here is this other author knows Mandelstam. But can you see her familiarity with some other layers of which can be defined as Jewish? Let's try to refer to it.
No, but why I took her to my dissertation is just to explain to a reader that like what is considered now as a Russian culture is not a Russian culture as it is a post-Soviet culture. And for a lot of people who immigrated, they are not Russian, we are post-Soviets. So this is kind of a culture. It's not a culture within one nation. It is like an umbrella culture for different nations. So about in my chapter about Katja Petrowskaja, I just claimed that this post-Soviet culture is sometimes the main part of an identity of an author.
They are read as Russian in the Soviet Union. You know, sorry, in the US, from the point of view, because migration, like my problem, so I also worked on migrant literature and yeah, all of those national, cultural, ethnic identities and linguistic identities too, and gender is important in my research as well. Anyway. When I started working in it, on it, and publishing and thinking about it in English, okay, that's also very important. Your audience, what you were writing to as a researcher, okay? I was, for maybe a year, I was stuck thinking, okay, I can either think about a migrant from the point of view of the receiving country, or from the point of view of the migrant who goes from like he or she doesn't know how he or she is going to be read in the country where we come from. He or she knows that I am this and I am now going somewhere else. But the fact that he or she feels I am this Lithuanian, let's say, doesn't mean that they're going to be read as Lithuanian. In fact, 100% they will not be read, especially in 1989 or 1990 or 1993. You know, nobody would have been read like identified as Lithuanian and watched it. And so it's very it's a complicated, discursive and sort of well, I would call it methodological ideas, you know, the perspective from which and to find a way to find a perspective to bring those the way they're being seen and read in the receiving country and the way they feel or identify themselves, and to methodologically bring those two perspectives into one is a big challenge for me anyway. post-colonial theory has been
Yeah, it's also
to me. Yeah. So thank you for that.
Mhm.
There is sort of, I have to leave it.
Thank you for that.
Yes, sir.
Fiction before,
No,
no, so writing in German.
it was your first. Yeah, it was your first novel, and then I think it was your first text, literary text. It was in German.
Because Katja Petrowskaja studied guitar too, and then she graduated from the NGGU, that means this humanities, the University of Humanities in Moscow. And he did her PhD there, the Tartu, maybe she, and would she meet Schlossman?
She did. She talks about a lot. She did. It was a big part of her life. Anyway, from that interview where I heard her in London, she did speak about this. But you know, she was a researcher, and
So she wrote in the Russian language. And
But it was not published. I think she wrote, of course.
I mean, wrote like not fiction, just their her thesis, thesis and stuff.
And maybe some text about your father, because she mentioned.
did you interview them, the authors? Did you interview them about what they felt?
Not all of them.
In terms of how they identified as a in terms of their national, cultural, and ethnic identity? It would be interesting.
I interviewed Alina Kimchi, Alex Epstein in Israel, and Katja Petrowskaja and Olga Grjaznowa in Germany. Yeah, only 4 of them on behalf of these 8 authors.
And how did they identify in terms of this, or you didn't ask them, how they identify in terms of their national, cultural, and ethnic identity?
Okay, I can say about every one of them, but just in short. As I can understand, for example, Olga Grjaznowa, she her identity is related more to her like she's translated in Arabic, from Arabic to German language. So she is rather like closer to Pan-Arabican, and her husband, by the way, is from one of Arabian countries. So although she is of Jewish roots, of Jewish origin, but I think she is just closer to this culture, not to this religion, and not to like any organization, but to this Arabian culture. She understands it, and she tries to, in her own identity, she tries to combine her Jewish origin and her Arabian professional identity. I think so. So this is the most complicated thing. About Alina Kimchi, she is pure Israeli. Although she immigrated from the Soviet Union, even in her text, there is nothing of post-Soviet culture, almost nothing. Nothing of Russian language, very few characters of Russian origin, which, like, I would say that Israel, the share of Israeli of Russian origin is much bigger than share of your character of Russian origin. So she's pure Israeli. And she's an actress, by the way. She speaks only Hebrew. I mean, with me, she communicated Hebrew and only Hebrew. Of course, she speaks English, of course, but not Russian. And as to Katja Petrovskaya, it is difficult to say. I know her like personally, and I'm afraid that maybe my like personal connection with her little bit changed my view on her. Like, yeah, I would say it's her identity. I would say, from my opinion, closer to post-Soviet cultural identity. I would say so. And the influence of her father is very strong. I can see the very strong influence of her father, who was actually a Soviet Jewish writer. She in Kiev. Yeah, she was born in Kiev.
Because again, with translingual writers, it's such a fascinating story always, like hearing the, like, so, the switch of what happened, or, and she was just saying that she had no voice. She didn't exist, when she arrived in Germany, and she had to, and somehow writing in Ukrainian or Russian would had no sense because she had no one to speak to, like that wouldn't carry her experience of who she was becoming, And then, she said that she started writing in German, little words, little sentences, and then it developed into. And I still wanted to invite her to the museum at Vilnius Lab, because we're planning an edition. It's a festival, a literary festival that I'm involved in. And I can't remember whatever happened, maybe COVID or something, or I can't forget whatever happened, that edition never materialized, and I never even reached out to her, but it would. And actually, that edition of Migrant authors has never happened, so maybe. It's awesome.
Do you have more questions? I would like to ask if this like separation between victims and other part, it was like not to feel a victim, and what was yes, perpetrator, and this separation and the choosing the language was the main thing. I mean, this is the main reason she started to write in German, and plus what Aglia said, that she had no audience to write in Ukraine and in Russian. And then, because I'm thinking, why not to choose Russian? Because there are so many Russians, everywhere can find the audience of readers. But it seemed somehow that she didn't want this audience. And I think there should be another reason why she.
It should be another reason, but she says this is Sorry?
What's the main reason?
The main reason is that if she talks about the war, about the Second World War, in Russian language, it means that this moral rightness is within the language. It is difficult to say about this war in Russian language without all these cultural points like Великая Отечественная война, which is within the language. So switch it to German language just to make the things more universal and more like not from the Soviet point of view, but that is what she says about it. But maybe there is another reason as well.
Maybe in my mind, this exists also because she published her novel before 2014, so before Crimean annexation and the war, and then maybe. But I understand this is very no good reason. Let's say. Yes, focus.
Yeah, there is an opinion in German, like in the conference I went to, which, it was a big conference on translingual writing, on migrant writing, maybe women, maybe only women, I'm not sure. And there was a big community of scholars who work on migrant writing in Germany, and the sort of unofficial opinion was that in Germany, it's quite cool. There was a trend to be an immigrant writer of whatever descent, and you know, it was like a literary identity that you could live, and it was a trendy literary identity. So she capitalized on that as well.
But then I think one of Russian, I can agree, these political persons, Alexander Morozov, he visited this university and there was a talk, and he said that the Russian language is very like penetrated by this propagandic discourse, and to speak about everything in history, it's like to make the point that Russian point, and the talk was about the future of Russian language in Lithuania, and our colleagues at the Department of Russian Philology at that time, they were worried what to do, and then they wanted to make like, they asked him to say that the Russian language always would be needed as clearly that that propaganda made this language like means of propaganda, and then you can do nothing.
Yes, but Alexander Morozov himself, he writes and to his readers in Russian, not in
Yes,
yeah.
yes, because they won't understand him, wouldn't understand him if he writes in another language.
No, but it means that he sees his readers as Russian people,
Yes.
not like, although he's an immigrant and he lives in the Czech Republic,
Yes.
in Prague, but he didn't want to switch to another language and to turn his idea and his amazing ideas, to turn his ideas to Western audience.
But not writing fiction.
No,
Yeah.
but about his political like critique of Russian regime would be like, I think it would be a good idea for like to switch to English language, but he just speaks with his audience. He sees his audience in Russia or in immigrant circles.
He not agree to the reform.
He did it. He passed away.
Okay, yes.
Yes, he emigrated to Georgi Economics. He wrote in Russian, but immediately he lived here, wrote in Russian, but immediately his novel immediately was translated into Lithuanian, so we knew him like a Lithuanian writer. And yet nobody read him in Russian, and he was subject about this.
Yes, this is such an interesting case, and I only understood it because it was a book with him, a book of interviews with him a few years back. And but who did the book? That's what I mean. Who interviewed him? I can't remember. Anyway, for the first time, I understood that, which I had not understood before. He was a Lithuanian Jew, born in a shtetl town. He went to the resource. Jonava, shtetl, literally a shtetl. Okay, so he was, I don't know, one of the 50 left Jews in town. Okay, like honestly, I don't know how he survived, but anyway, he survived and he became a writer. But he became a Soviet writer And so there, and he wrote to the entire Soviet Union, and he says this, he's like, I was a Soviet writer. But yes, he only came to me and to all of us in Lithuania because there was such a thing as a Lithuanian Soviet writer too. And he was that. But then I don't know exactly when he emigrated to Israel, and he continued writing in Russian and being translated into Lithuanian while living in Israel. I know, how fascinating.
Beginning of 90s.
You see that in 1990s? Fascinating stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Yeah. But he says in this interview, I think he said that he always felt this like his yes, like he was different because he was a Jew. But his father survived because he was a surveillance, still a seamstress, no, like a tailor. A tailor, he was a tailor and was so good that he made uniforms for these generals. So he, yes, he was in the Second World War and and they knew that he was a tailor and he did a uniforms for these marshal generals, etc. And that's why he survived, I think, because he survived, father survived as well.
I have them looked at more now,
and he was very, and Kamovich was very popular because of this theater. It was Rimas Tuminas, one of the best directors of the pastors. So he made performance smile to us both like and
smile to us.
and then he yes, and he made this performance also in Moscow, and then Kamovich became so big, great that it was but he wrote about Lithuania, about Vilnius, about Jonava.
Exactly, yes, that's my thing. Yeah, that's right. All of his novels were set in Lithuania. He never wrote them anywhere else. And there are some, he would go in the summer, he would go to summer resorts to like Palanga, and Lithuanian summer resort. And the entire Soviet Union would come to that summer resort, and he would be a star. He would suddenly meet his readership from all over the big Soviet country. Yes, it's a thing, to be honestly, who interviewed him? I don't know. But
because I saw that he was here, only Lithuanians read them.
Okay, I tell you, to me, it was also a big discovery. I have never understood this. Like it was, I know she had this interviewed him, Olga, I can't remember, it's a whole book of interviews, really fascinating stuff.
I have all his books, if you would like to read in Russian.
Yeah, if I would, I'm really interested in him because he was Jew, and his like cultural identity is really complicated. So
But what I think that he would communicate with his parents in English.
Oh, you mean his
Sergei? No. I mean,
yeah, right, and yours, right. But
I maybe or maybe parents.
Anyway, sorry, but first of all, we need to really like the book of interviews I'm telling you about is in Lithuanian. I don't know whether it exists in any other language. His son is still alive, and he's a very willing ambassador to his dad, who has recently passed away. But his son would know what was his first language, whether he spoke it.
Yeah, we can ask him. He's on Facebook and it's happy to.
And his son is
His
here.
son is in Israel. But no,
He's in Berkeley, yeah.
yes, but father lived in Israel and he was visiting him. Big,
And look, his stories, like the Lord is all pretty much. In a few years. What's your current, like you're researching something now here, what are you working on now?
It's not about literature, it's about archives in Yiddish and Hebrew, and it is more closer to digital humanities. I just try to develop tools, digital tools to read and automatically process the documents from archives, because there are very few of researchers who can read Yiddish or Hebrew, and a lot of documents that should be like read. So I try to create some tools to process the documents automatically.
But also about cultural identity.
Yeah, it is also about identity, because for me it's interesting also as a part of identity of my research is to understand the how the level of education, the social status of these people who wrote these EGU documents, because it's mostly about diaries and letters. So I search for diaries and letters, and it is interesting for me how the social status and how it was influenced by the language that they use. Yiddish, Hebrew, or maybe Russian, because also there are a lot of documents in Russian language. Sorry?
Maybe Polish.
Maybe Polish, maybe Lithuanian, and so on. So there should be some correlation. Oh, not just I just wanted to see this correlation.
Identity, I know, like migration, identity, whatever.
It's very popular.
There to work on. Oh,
It is very popular, yeah, it's very hot topic, but
it's just, no, the reason I'm saying this, that one of my second doctoral scholarship was called something coach between culture, language, and identities. I was looking at motherhood and how, as a mother, and a migrant mother, how do you bring your children up in one language and with one identity and with one culture? Like, what do you give your child as a mother? And I was looking at representations of that, like how do you also talk about it in the text?
Mm-hmm.
Do we have more questions? Maybe we can move to Kathy.
I have a question, but I will ask it. I will ask it later.
Yeah, but
you can ask and we will.
Yeah, so one thing that came to me with this quote that is still on screen, so this is kind of the original Russian text and then the full, correct or adequate translation of it into English,
I'm
but
not sure that it's a correct translation. Maybe it's my translation. I'm sorry.
no, but I mean, this translation represents the original as it is in Russian, but yes, it represents, no, don't take. So, but what I meant that in that character, in Bronski's novel, quotes this, or even somehow changes it. It means that this cultural text, or this cultural artifact, also exists as a translation into German in the German culture, and it is a cultural artifact of significance for just a German person who has no connections to this Soviet or post-Soviet or Russian or whatever culture. So this, I think, this a little bit, I don't know, complicates or maybe adds a next layer to all of this usage of cultural artifacts as markers of mixed identity, or as these
play things that authors with mixed identity use, because a text can also be significant in a totally different way in its translation, and it can function totally differently of reading that in the target culture. And maybe this is what we are seeing here, that it means something for this German-speaking character, and maybe for other German-speaking people who only saw it in translation. Maybe for them it's just a romantic verse, not a romantic poem. Maybe for them, because they are totally disconnected from this original Soviet context when it meant that the author and his beloved are about to be arrested and they are in despair about that. So it can mean something else. And it is not like he's mistaken about it, but for him genuinely means this. Like it is a genuine thing in his worldview and in his understanding of cultural artifacts. So I just another layer of complicating all of that.
Maybe, but first of all, of course, there is a German translation of Mandelstam, and there is a German translation of this verse. But this text, which he put on the postcard, is already altered, and it is not he was who altered it. This text allegedly was already, he found it on some internet forum.
That means it exists, it functions there in German-speaking culture as a romantic poem.
The author says it.
Yes, the author, yeah, the author imagines it. I don't know if it is, but we should be aware of this type of cultural artifacts functionality within culture.
Yeah, of course.
So just like this point with that Bruder Jakob could actually, maybe she replaced it for something recognizable by the German reader, but maybe it actually was, as we express the hypothesis here, that maybe something actually borrowed and something recognizable in her own childhood. So it like borrowed thing also functions in culture. Very complicated. I mean, just
yeah, but one question is what is actually is in this culture, and another question what like function of this story or of this some like device, what author wanted, why author put it here, and what reader can take from this case. In the case of Alina Bronski, she just shows to the reader, or a reader can see it in the text, how ignorant are,
right.
How ignorant are these young German guys who even doesn't know the origin of the verse of the great Russian literature. It's funny. She said this with irony. It's not to show about the great.
I would like to ask if these contemporary authors somehow relate themselves to the earlier diaspora writers, Russian diaspora writers who emigrated from Russia, from the Soviet Union after the revolution in the 1920s, who lived in Berlin. So, for example, is Nabokov important for these authors? Do they somehow relate to this diasporic experience?
For those who switch to another language, the German, for example, there is I cannot see any relations to previous waves of migration and the authors. But beside of them, I also investigated another author who immigrated and went on writing in Russian. So for them, it is really very important, and previous like Dovlatov in the United States and Nabokov in Germany, for them it is important. So there are like different like subcultures of post-Soviet authors.
Bronski.
That's great.
Like my
Not remember.
I
I don't remember, but if you talk about the text in like words in Jewish words, like is there any Jewish words in Katja Petrowskaja manual?
There is a play with word Stern because her brother, her father brother is Petrovsky Stern, and she plays with this word. Of course, we can see this word as a German word, but for her it was the word from Yiddish.
So it's fine. So.
Her brother, who grew up in the same family, he said that the only Yiddish word he knew until he was adult was Tumbalalayka, and he didn't know it from Yiddish song Tumbalalayka. He knew it from this guy, this Soviet bard who was Galich. He knew it from this Russian Soviet song about Auschwitz. Or not Auschwitz, Treblinka, Janusz Korczak, Galich, who but he didn't know even this. He didn't know even this, though it's very famous. But so their family was very, very much detached from anything Jewish. Even like there were families in Kiev at the time who used Yiddish. Or you have like this Yiddish word mixed in your language, and the only character with this is her aunt Lydia, whom she mentioned, and she made this recipe for еврейский kvass, and she doesn't like, she's not sure if it's еврейский or еврейский kvass. It's very funny, but like, and she is silent in her book. So I guess everything which is connected to the Jewish is very silent in the.
But the title. Esther
And then
is Jewish name, and this maybe Esther sounds like a Jewish, very Jewish.
What's the name of Katja Petrowskaja's first book in German?
Vielleicht ist er, vielleicht.
Right.
Vielleicht.
And what is it translated as?
Sorry?
And what is it translated into English as? You read it in English.
Perhaps.
Maybe.
Maybe.
Thank you. Yeah.
So the name is
It's worth to read.
I would like to read the book.
No, I asked this because I lost it. It's the new material for me, and I understood from your annotation that those authors wrote novels. But now the discussion goes on as about memoirs, or at least autobiographical, strongly autobiographical novels. Is it so? Is it fiction, or is it memoirs?
Yes, a good question. Usually for the migrant author, the first novel is based on like memoirs or autobiographical traits. For example, it is the case for Olga Grjaznowa, for example. Her first novel was full of her autobiographical traits, and the narrator is almost like she herself. But her second novel and her third novel already doesn't have any in common with her biography traits. It is already pure, not migrant, but pure like German literature without any memoirs. And I think Petrovskaja's second book also already don't have any in common with her biography. It's just the first book of any author.
It's kind of
It's like out of which.
Yeah, it is.
Like you don't know, but you feel that this is true. Like климатизированный
And I think he also her first Victor Ramasha, the first one is also about the experience of migration, and then the next one says, you just mentioned like no connection to it.
Yes, so I understand that's the same for all of these authors whom I yeah.
Oh,
Yeah,
Alex Epstein doesn't actually.
Yeah, Epstein, yeah. He started already write but he doesn't write any novels,
Yeah,
just short stories.
Zeidman also, like you didn't mention him here, but in your article, Zeidman also about his like family and roots.
Yeah.
Have you thought of that phenomenon? And have you reflected on that phenomenon as you said that the first novels, first books are more biographical? What do you think?
I just took it as a fact which like everybody knows, and I didn't think about it, but
It just make specifically because of these, they are so productive to, I think, this research cultural identities, right? Because they are like autobiographical.
but this is a question about like migrant literature. This notion of migrant literature is very not clear. For example, Olga Grjaznowa says that she hates this term of migrant literature because it's impossible just to mark somebody as a migrant author just because he moved from one country to another country. So I would say that the first novel of any migrant, not any, but these migrant authors, belongs to maybe migrant literature, but the second and third and so on, already it is not already migrant literature. So for me, migrant literature is a literature about that has some biographical traits and that based on some experience of migration. This is migrant literature. Yeah.
It is a very from the land itself, of course. And many of them sort of rebel against it in many different ways. You know, for example, there is this the author, Jim Ken, who she's Chinese, she emigrated from China to Canada and then started writing in French. Migrant writing, écriture migrante. And then as of whatever novel, she removed all references to any place. Like, okay, I'm not like, leave me alone. I'm not like, no time, no that. Like, can I just write and leave? Yeah, like, that's a female author. Okay, what's a woman author? Can I get on? Can I just be a writer? But in terms of poetics, like no matter, like a lot of there is a even if the subject matter might not be to do from leaving from one place and going to another place, the representation of space and representation of the world, of what is the world, is different in migrant authors. It is just that your understanding of who you are and what the world is different when you have, in a major way, moved from one language to cultural, national cultural ethnic identity and went somewhere else in a big way, like in a profound way where you've changed the language and stuff. The way you see the world and represent and the way you are in the world and in the text is different, and it is readable in the text on the level of the poetics, on the level, especially space and the world. So, you can remove all references to physics, whatever. It's just different ways of being in charge. It's a different place. I think so.
But we meant to say that and it's different in this way you're talking about Australia and she meditates in this novel, she meditates this being between languages without Lithuanian language, very interesting. But she didn't switch to English, Lithuanian writer who lived for a long time in about 10 years in Australia and recently published a novel about Australia, a very good one, and it is translated already in English. Maybe it's not published, but translated. And she said that she even didn't consider the possibility to change language. No, she said that only the same.
The Lithuanians are conservative about their language. Linguistic choices.
It's a good thing.
Anyway, beautiful title.
No, but really, if you look at our literary history, very few examples. Right? I don't think we have any example of a writer who switched to German, for example. French, did anybody try writing in French?
Yes, but he's Jewish as well, thank you.
We have production. And we have organization.
That's a very good point. Yeah, that's very good. Anyway, Stephen Calvin is the guy who wrote Translingual Imagination. But anyway, it doesn't matter, the book is out now, you are in a different field now. Literally translingualism, why from my fault, translingual writers, anyway, you don't need to know this.
I think Calvin is one of his book was one of the book which like I based it on in my dissertation.
Oh, there you go. I think we have thank you.
Contact with all of you and maybe just not to share ideas, but okay, also to share ideas and to yeah, please.
I'm not